Hey, hey, this is Rashida Green, and you are listening to the Crossroads Podcast, a show for and about environmental justice and those who fight the fight with skin as melanated as the days are long. Knowledge is power, and we're breaking down stereotypes one episode at a time. Let's start the show. Everybody, welcome to the Crossroads Podcast. I am so excited. This is my first ever episode. So, the audio that I have for you guys is between myself. It's an interview between myself and the Black Urbanist, Kristen Jeffers. She is a mentor, she is a friend, and she's been so very supportive of me as I'm working on my podcast. So she's going to be EPing some things. I'm certain she'll be a guest on my show with other folks. So get ready. We got some good things that are coming down the pike. Yeah, let's get back to the excitement of this show and what I'm going to be talking about. So, as I said, the crossroads are an intersection, but in this case, it's an intersection between the Black community and the environment. We don't often talk about the environment in terms of our community. We may in terms of natural disasters, hurricanes, etc. And those, yes, disproportionately affect our community. But there are so many other things too that we also need to be cognizant of so that we can combat. So this isn't going to just be 30 minutes, 45 minutes of gloom and doom, but it is going to be dark and stormy. The good thing is that we have tools and we have people who know what they're doing, who have the knowledge and the background to give you some hope. Because we can save this world, we can save this earth and our home, but we have to take better care of it than obviously what we've been doing. And we can do that. We do so many things. We're magical beings. We can handle it. So just a little snip of what you're going to be seeing from me. But thank you guys again so much for tuning in. And I hope you enjoy the interview between Kristen and I.
So welcome to the Black Urbanist Radio Show. Again, I'm back here, Kristen Jeffers. It is a wonderful pleasure to have Rashida Green with me today. She is actually, I'm going to have Rashida introduce yourself. So Rashida, introduce yourself and tell folks why you're here today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Kristen. So again, I'm Rashida Green, and I am starting a podcast called The Crossroads. It's a look into environmental justice, obviously from the Black perspective. And we call it The Crossroads because all roads intersect. And there's so many intersections between the environment and the issues that we are seeing and facing and the Black community, because we're obviously very much so affected by all of that. So that's a little bit about my podcast. Hoping to have some episodes up and running very soon. Some interesting information that we can discuss and share.
That's excellent. I mean, it's necessary. And I think especially it's really fun that you're calling it The Crossroads. Of course, my mind is going, of course, to the what is it? Is it Bone Thugs or Wu-Tang? I mean,
Bone Thugs and Harmony.
Okay. Y'all, I'm still ahead. Don't take my card from me. I'm still ahead, and there'll be a lot of people who will have that association. And again, really tying into Black community is really dope. I know for me, when I started this show, I was adamant, and the platform, I was adamant about it being Black versus being, African American or I don't know, minority. I'm proud of being Black.
Yes.
And I feel like the word Black speaks to a specific American experience, a specific American Southern experience. I guess I could have called it the Black Southern Urbanist, but, it's been almost 10 years. So rolling back now. So it's going to be great once we get that out there. But on my show, I like to always take you back to the beginning and ask people, like, how did you get interested in this? Because I've always been interested as a child. This has been like a curiosity. I've turned this curiosity into a working sort of thing, a working flex. And, it's definitely yielded me some benefits over the years of all kinds. So take me back to the beginning. What made you think about environmentalism, or was it something that really hit you as an adult? Kind of where you were that first spark of thinking through these issues?
Wow. So I actually I went to an HBCU. I went to a Spelman College graduate, and being in as most HBCUs, you'll notice that they're usually located in the hood. It's always in a low income, just basically deserted, but once thriving Black community, and Spelman is no different. And being there, learning and seeing the environment, which is a very sharp contrast from how I grew up. And I always, when I was there, I wanted to be a scientist. Like I went to school to study biology. And that didn't quite pan out, thanks in part to the MCAT. But I knew that I wanted to do something that was community based. I was very active, like protesting, things like that, marching when I was in school. So I knew activism was always just kind of like one of those things that I wanted to do. So getting older and trying to work and figure things out, I fell back in love again with science, and I found a great program at a school called Antioch University. It's located in LA, that has an urban sustainability program, which is basically a combination of science. Obviously, like there's a lot of biochemistry involved, or some biochemistry involved, policy advocacy, and social justice. And these are all things that are interests of mine. So that's kind of how I got into it. And then just from my previous work and the work that I'm still doing with involving mass incarceration, I just really found that, or I assumed that there was a connection between mass incarceration and the environment. Like I believed it. So that's kind of how I approached my application process. And then, of course, when I get to the program, I find absolutely there's connections between, the environment and mass incarceration. So what we learned in the program was more so focused about where prisons are located in terms of land and space. Obviously, like who owned that land before the state decided to use that for a facility, what kind of chaos that caused in the ecosystem there. Also, just the fact that they're the people as an environment, as their own personal ecosystem, and how being incarcerated messes that up. It fucks it up. Like no advanced thoughts about it. Like between the food, just the actual environment itself, solitary confinement, the food that their people are fed. I mean, they're more likely to come out with health disparities just based upon being incarcerated that they may not have had going into being incarcerated. So it was a lot of that. And then learning also that obviously when that person is removed from the home, what happens to their family? If they're a breadwinner, primary breadwinner, that means that their family's potentially food insecure. So, and that was the first piece that really attracted me, was just thinking about food deserts or food insecurity. And some people want to call it food apartheid. Just the vast disparities between people who live in neighborhoods where they can easily access fruits and vegetables, or go to a store that isn't just a corner store with plastic bags full of, food made by robots, and no fruit and no vegetables. So that was how I initially got started. And beyond just mass incarceration, I have peeled back so many layers and so many things and in areas of interest just beyond that. But obviously mass incarceration is like one of my main passions. I have others now thanks to this program, but that's the
stories
story.
Are dope. For me, obviously I had sort of adjacent things. I thought for the longest time, I thought I was going to be an attorney. So that would have probably tied me more into the criminal justice system and seeing how those effects happen. But it's hard not to think about that because, again, there's so many people for the littlest of things. I think it was Clint Smith. He was on Twitter a couple of days ago talking about helping people understand how oftentimes recidivism is not because somebody actually did something. Sometimes it is literally you're going back in because your parole officer or you missed a meeting. It's very easy to get in the system.
Yes.
It is very hard to get away from the system. And we need more programming and more focus on helping people make that transition. I was also watching a documentary the evening before we recorded this. It was about gay men in prison. And they talked about there were actually trans women involved in this documentary as well. There was a person who lives as a gay man, but is also a drag queen. And all these people talking about in different states how their bodies were affected and how their minds were affected and how their identity was affected, and how so that really took them away from just feeling like they were human. And so, and again, prison is a place. prison is a place, and it is a place that has an outsized influence in our community. There's a fear of getting there. There's a fear of people who have been there.
Yes.
There's fear when you're inside there. There's fear when you of what type of people person you are in there, what you did to get in there, and what they're going to do with you, either if your sexuality or gender identity, or if you did whatever you did, like if you're going to get prison justice handed to you. It's interesting because I am in the early days, I definitely watched Orange is the New Black, but as time went on, I couldn't really, I could not really watch that show as entertainment. It was educational at first because I never realized the extent of queer women involved in there. And it kind of helped me kind of see, well, hey, I do have something in common with this woman. It's not being in prison. But there's such,
right.
And I agree with all the folks who have come out to say that when we do these prison shows, like a prison show, a cop show, some of these shows, it's really hard to have that representation because we know it's okay. Yeah,
keep going. I'm sorry.
It's that representation of it just being a place of entertainment, and then the heartbreaking piece of especially the Black characters, the principal Black characters you got to know in the first season. Olivia, Poussey, and what got them there, and especially those two and how they got there was traumatizing, re-traumatizing. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
even Tasty.
Too.
Yeah, it's just like. I love Tasty. And it's like, I think that the moment that I realized that this was not for real for me anymore was the little season finale. I can't remember which season, but when they were outside in the lake swimming around, I was like, look at this. Look at this Disneyland mess we are looking at right now. Like, what is this? It doesn't, and that's when I was like, okay, I can't look at this show for anything else beyond just entertainment. Whereas before I could kind of see some merit in it. It's definitely a far cry from Lock Up, Raw.
Yeah, and they tried to simulate that in later seasons. The prison was bought out by a private company. And when the prison was bought by a private company, that's when you started to see people die. Like the Poussey's death and how that happened. That just, I was not even watching it at that point because I noticed that Netflix seemed to be like, specializing in buying all these like really dark shows and getting you really hooked on them. And they're really well done, really well written, but it was going dark. And I'm like, I need my TV to kind of pep me up a little bit, And so I noticed that. And so I had to step away from another thing was I was living on my own when Netflix started to stream. I moved back home for a little while. I was like, okay, I don't have my streaming set up. It's different. Okay, I'm losing seasons. I get back out on my own. I hear about all these things happening on the show since I started watching. I have affinity for the actress in real life that plays Poussey. And it's like, okay, why are you doing this to her? And then and then you think about Olivia's story as a trans woman, like, why did you do this to her to get in here? Tasty. And then, what is it? What's the girl? It's the fact that the girl had her own, like the nickname was bad enough, but I can't remember her real name. Yeah. And then the fact that it kind of echoed that whole situation, hers with the whole situation of being, the family, the gay women, lesbian women who adopted all those kids, and then they had to murder suicide. And it was like, all these adoption stories, and they adopt a kid, and then they actually have a biological kid. They adopt a Black kid, and that the Black kid is so dramatically different. Yeah. And then that, like I said, that's sort of a breaking place. Kids who grow up is, what they call transracial adoptees, and their sense of place is sort of violated. People who are encountering the criminal justice system, and like I said, I watch every show now, and I ask myself, was this necessary to have this story involved? This sort of like push to the criminal justice community. I've been watching American Soul, and warning everybody listening, spoiler alerts throughout if you haven't watched any of these shows, but this is how, you've listened to me for a while. This is how I do. And, essentially Rashida's show is also going to get, once we get deep into it, and I'll talk more about how I'll be involved with her show in a little bit later in this program. But essentially American Soul is really cool. And like I said, who doesn't know Soul Train? Who isn't like obsessed? But almost immediately in the first frame, they show him taking his life. He's sitting there crying. He's watching a tape of Gladys Knight as played by Kelly Rowland, which she did a wonderful job. It's pretty cool. Yeah, it was great. It was a great portrayal. So you go and then they flash back to like the 70s when it all starts. And essentially what it looks like they did was there's a real story of potentially real people involved in the creation of it. Tony Cornelius, Don Cornelius' son, is an executive producer and did help with casting and creating the story. So there's a great degree of accuracy. The set looks pretty accurate for the timeline. You start to see the evolution of the set and how money's affected things. But on the flip side, I often wonder how many of these characters were real, and if these composite characters were real, and if they were necessary to be in the story. I won't spoil this one too hard, but there's definitely it looks like a nod towards the modern times. The way the slang that's used is more modern. Yeah, they don't.
Oh Lord.
No, the kids talk more like you would now, versus what they would have said then. And there was a very distinct Black slang that my parents used in the 1970s. You do not hear that with these kids. And then this whole relationship with LA and its violence. And, of course, we're recording this. It's not been long after Nipsey Hussle's murder and, seeing all the things around that. But it's almost like it's gearing towards that generation that knows about Nipsey and knows about his role in creating the community in LA and the music world and everything, the internet and all these other people who are out in LA doing sort of on semi-underground dope stuff. It's not really speaking more. I mean, yes, there's obviously the people are wearing period appropriate clothing. We do have a Vietnam vet and a parent is a Vietnam person is involved in Vietnam and dies as a result of that. So that's there. That feels authentic to the time that a parent would die because of Vietnam and that a character got his draft card pulled. And that was a potential thing. The kids also, there's a separate group that starts, but it's not the same. And I was telling my partner this morning when we were talking about how we watch this show. I was saying this is a show that like they did actually start that show, and they did actually he did start a band after he had been in it for 10 years, but the band wasn't in the early stages as it was, even not in like 1973, because they do kind of speed you through the first couple years in the first season. And I'm glad that they're doing that. But it seems like because they they knew about these kids, they knew that there were dancers. They needed to make up like backstories for the dancers, but the backstories for the dancers speak more to the times we live in versus the times that those kids actually lived in. So there's some of the stuff. So again, long story short here, there's some violence in that show. There's some relationships with the police and how people were seen that I'm not quite sure is accurate. Again, anybody listening, correct me if I'm wrong. You can always tweet at me or do things of that nature to kind of help me with that. But I do want to kind of turn us, I always like, of course, when you talk about your personal stories, anybody who listens to this show knows if there's something there that I pick out, I always like to kind of explore that a little bit. And again, when you talked about prison as a place, you talked about the words apartheid. We need to be using that word a little more than we do. I want to give a shout out to Lawrence Brown up in Baltimore, Dr. Lawrence Brown at Morgan State. He does use the words apartheid when he talks about sort of the disparities in Baltimore. And it definitely rankles you. You're like, oh my God, is that where I really live? Is that what we're really living in? The fragile. Yeah, and it is. And yes. you have your fragility moment, and you're like, okay, I need to get this together. Like, this is not going to be sustainable long term.
Yeah.
I got to get this together. I got to understand that, okay, this word really portrays the urgency in getting these things right in our community. Not having adequate transportation, adequate food, adequate places. The major placemaking things in our communities are prison and church, and the problematics of both of those institutions. Yeah.
I mean, like, and just to kind of piggyback off what you're saying, I mean, the thing that about place and the importance of place, and also as it relates to class too, because that is something that as as a person who currently lives in Maryland, but is living in a
Mm-hmm.
more
Mm-hmm.
affluent county in the state of Maryland that is outside of Baltimore City or Baltimore City proper or Baltimore County, you know, the interesting thing is that Baltimore and the surrounding immediate suburbs of the city like itself are where the majority of the money for bail bond
Ooh,
comes from.
yeah. No,
So
yeah.
no surprises there. And the interesting thing is that we're coming up close to the end of the legislative session in the state of Maryland, and I think other states as well. But we are voting on things that we are sending our delegates to Annapolis to vote on legislation that does not necessarily impact us directly, but has a direct effect on Baltimore and its residents. And this idea that we forget that we have a bit of slack in the sense that we don't have the same immediate problems kind of blinds us and makes us not as cognizant of the issues that other folks are having where it really counts. And that is something that in terms of talking about mass incarceration, but also talking about that when in the nuanced lens of class that we really have to be careful about, because there's something about even in a book that I'm in like the middle of reading, like every other book,
Mm.
called Locking Up Our Own, where the author talks about how policing and also just the folks in power in DC at the time in like the 70s were
Yeah,
really
yeah.
in favor of these harsher punishments, and he wasn't doing it as a means to say this is a great example, but talking about it in terms of this is how people used to think, that there was this, again, playing into those concepts of identity politics and respectability politics, that if I have a certain status, I should maintain it, and that folks who don't, or folks that may have a drug addiction, well, then you just need to get out of here because you're pulling the rest of us down. And it's like we're not great until we're all great. So that concept isn't lost on what we're seeing and experiencing now, particularly as in the Black community, as that pertains to how we think about or conceptualize what needs to happen to folks that don't live where we live or don't have the same kind of
Hmm.
access as we do. You know what I mean? And it's that, like, I don't know if have you seen the movie Us? We were doing spoilers on this episode.
So
Have you seen?
I
Have
am
you watched Us
everybody who
yet, by chance?
listens knows that I'm not a horror fan, and so what I did was, because I knew I wasn't a horror
No.
fan, but I wanted to be a part of this conversation this time because I kind of missed out on Get Out a little bit. I did read the spoilers, so I kind of know what happened and what the premise is, and how there was an underground and there was an above ground and everything. So, and that was literally Us. It's literally, again, it's Jordan Peele doing what he does well, taking tropes of the Black community, real fears, and creating something that's really authentic. That's not so much scary in the whole macabre, like horror, blood and gore sense, but scary in the psychological, makes you think, makes you really sometimes angry, or sometimes just concerned, or sometimes just makes you just check out. Like, I've heard of folks checking out when they're watching the movie because it's just
Yeah.
weird. And but tell me more about what your insight was, because I haven't seen it. You definitely have an insight from seeing it about something in this space that we're talking about.
Yeah, and when you go, just watch it between your fingers. Like, just keep your fingers and then just close them so that you can protect yourself. But no, like there are so many great moments in the movie. One of the ones that really stuck out to me is like the first confrontation between Red and her family from the underground, and Adelaide and Gabe and their kids. And interestingly, Gabe's doppelganger couldn't see because, Gabe wears glasses and he's always adjusting and pushing them up with his finger. And that's what his doppelganger is doing, except I don't know if he was actually blind or just everything was blurry or hazy, but he just snatched his glasses off and put them on his face. And it was like the idea of access, like imagining having an issue, like I wear
Yeah,
glasses, you
yeah.
wear glasses, but imagining having someone else going through life, stumbling around, unable to see what they're doing, and all they simply have to do is just have access to what they need to improve their situation. And it's like, And there was just so many little details like that in the film that just really stood out to me. And that was one of them. Like and that goes back into the case of access. And that's where we get into really getting into the details of talking about wealth. And obviously something that we as Black people are trying to do very diligently is to build wealth in ourselves. Like, we're seeing all these articles and things now about how by the year 2053, the net worth of Black people will be zero. So everyone's like, well, what are we going to do? But it's not just those of us who have already, who've gone to college or going to grad school or have different things or grew up in a relatively middle-class neighborhood or a middle-class life. We also have to think about the people who don't even have that, who aren't going to a dentist. They're going to the local school of dentistry to let those kids work it out. You know what I mean? And or having to go to the Minute Clinic just as what you do, or Planned Parenthood as just what you do. So, and really and I think sometimes affluence makes you forget those things, or having access makes you forget those things. And I think that was one of the key things that stood out to me in us. And that is one of the things that even as in my own personal work that I'm thinking about in terms of how I relate and how I show up for people who I know don't have as much as I do, or may look at me and assume that I've always had, and that may not necessarily be the case, So that's where I was going with that. Please watch it. So we can talk about it.
Fine. And speaking of the fact that we're going to be having more conversations, I'll go ahead as we get ready to wrap up here with this first episode and really talk about sort of the bridge that's going to happen between the Black Urbanist Radio Show and Crossroads, the Crossroads Show. So essentially, I've been brought on to executive produce, and I will be mentoring Rashida through her process of creating her new show. You're going to hear a lot more narrative audio. You're going to hear a lot more. It's going to sound a little bit more NPR-y as far as being out in the field a little bit. I'll still be here, but I'll mostly be talking individually, interviewing people. You're going to hear some new interviews coming up. I did kind of disappear in the ether for a little while, but I'm back. There's gonna definitely be some changes kind of around, and there's been some things going on behind the scenes that I'm ready to kind of share and talk about. But I'll still be mostly a talk show. It'll be either myself or Rashida and myself and some other folks who come on a regular basis and talk about issues. But the key difference here is Rashida's show is going to go out into the field, and really you're going to hear from people yourself. So you basically tell them more about what you hope to do with the show as we wrap up here and what you hope people will learn. And again, the other thing is going to be different with her show and this is part of why this episode is a little shorter than we normally do here at the TBU radio show, is that it will be a shorter show. I'll still be doing however long a conversation goes. She'll be doing more tighter shows. So you'll be able to listen to this one quickly. If your commute's only 25, 30 minutes, you'll be able to listen to her in the whole commute. Whereas with me, I'm going to be kind of like the read, but a little bit shorter. It'll be commute and a half, several showers. I know somebody who does the shower flex, and they listen to the read. I mean, that, get through a long day at work. I know when Girl on Guy, when Aisha Tyler was producing her show, I know with her, that would get me through design reviews when I was still working in an architecture firm, helping with proposal management. That's what got me through. And that's kind of like the root of the Black Urbanist Radio Show, these conversations and going back to the beginning and talking to people and running with whatever we have on our minds and stream of consciousness and tying in real life stuff to very real environmental justice and urban planning and civic planning and whatever issues. But tell me, Rashida, what you hope to do with your show and what we hope to accomplish and the voices you hope to amplify. And that, honestly, when I hear that question out of my mouth, I was like, this is kind of cliche. And of course you hope environmental justice is rectified. And of course you want to amplify our voices of our community. But really though, you yourself doing this as yourself, as a Black woman in the world, what do you hope to do with this, specifically coming from your lens and your perspective as an individual Black woman? We're not all the same. I've said that on my page for years, but what do you want to do with this?
Yes. I really want to and I'm going to be corny, I do want to amplify the voices. And because there's been such a history of environmental justice, which is an offshoot of civil rights. But that doesn't get the shine. Like when you think about what an environmentalist looks like, you think about a white dude with locks and cowrie shells and Birkenstocks and on a skateboard with a bunch of peace signs and save the whale stickers. You don't think about someone who looks like me or someone who looks like you caring about what's happening in the world. And the irony in that statement is that we are the most affected. Poor people of color, Black people we live in neighborhoods that are overrun with environmental burdens. We're more likely to live closer to toxic waste sites. Like there's so many things and so many issues, and that compounds the health disparities that we already are facing as a people. So really I want to change the narrative, and I want to create and amplify the narratives that are already out here. There's so many great workers and advocates and activists who are already doing this work, who need to have a platform, who need to have their work amplified. And that is my main goal. I do want to do some traveling, and I definitely want to have interviews with folks who are down on the trenches getting the work done. Hope to do some travel and getting out to different areas, and obviously not just in America, but or in Maryland or DC, in the DC area, really getting out into the countries that are part of the diaspora, because we are all facing these challenges in various ways. And I really want to get into that and highlight it and bring it up to the generation, to attract the children. I know the Crossroads song is not exactly of the children, but that's all right.
It's old school for them. Like I say, aunties and uncles and things, they're passing this down now. Like I said, I can kind of understand now how our parents felt as baby boomers who came through the 60s and 70s, and they were hip and cool and wild, and all these things were going on. And even our grandparents, they, even though they were during a lot of war times, I mean, our parents as well, Vietnam kind of overlapped our parents' war times as well as some of the, the conflicts, but essentially like mass war, mass segregation, definitely there's always been sort of a youth culture and then a parent culture, like an elder culture. And there's been elders that straddle both because, the children, they don't have, but there's always sort of been that. And so that's exciting that it is. And, we can always have more voices. We always have different types of voices. Everybody's going to hear different things and different sounds. And that's what I love about the audio world and the podcasting world and the YouTubing world. I feel like that's the point. That's why the platform was called YouTube, there could be another one called We Audio. And I think something like that does exist, but it's not quite the same kind of thing as YouTube does. But it's basically amplifying these voices. It's basically helping people who are interested in listening to this type of show, but then also people who are, I always like to say with this show, with my show, it's people who are in the field, helping them listen and get to know others in the field so that they don't feel like they're alone. A big element with mine is, of course, people who are practitioners, helping them make sense of their practice, because it's vital. Because again, like you said, the granola, dreadlockier person, we have locks for ours first and should stay ours. Like I said, no disrespect, we try, but it's a different kind of thing. But we wear Birkenstocks too. Shout out to Afro, shout out to institutions like REI that do support Black leadership in the environmental spaces. Shout out to Black Girls Bike, shout out to Black Women Bike, all these different organizations that are helping Black women and men and Black non-binary folks get a sense of where they are and again, we still walk the same earth. We see these same things, right. But as we mentioned before with the us conversation just earlier, we often don't get a chance to express ourselves in the same way. We're underfunded, we're underfed, we're under immense pressure to underutilized, we're marginalized, we're pushed, but we still exist And if I myself, coming from a family with a parent who struggled from a major mental illness and major trauma, could still manage to get me outside on a bicycle and help me stand up, go through multiple bicycles. We still walked our community. He still was respected. We still went to parks. We still went to outdoor things. And then as an adult, finding a way to still, despite discriminations and how people can treat people out on trails and in hiking areas, sometimes still in national parks, unfortunately, the fact that I'm able to do those things, that speaks, I think, to a lot. It speaks to being able to grow and change, and the fact that this is still a very important thing in our community, and our conversations need to be had as our conversations. But with that, as we come to the close of the show, I'm going to have Rashida tell you where you can find her, where you can find the Crossroads Show, and of course, you will hear some of it here. Occasionally, there will be other cross episodes, but mostly when you hear me over there, we kind of like that Phoebe Robinson does with Ayana. I'll be over there popping in every once in a while, getting on the mic, saying funny things, encouraging story direction. But tell them, Rashida, where to find you.
Okay, so now my website is still in production, but it's basically allroadscross.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Crossroads Podcast, and I'm on Twitter as well, Crossroads, and it's POC1 on Twitter as well. You can just type in Crossroads, it'll come right up. And yeah, where I'm coming. We're getting the recordings together. I'm going to get the website up and running, and you can follow me on social media, where I'm basically just begging and pleading you to not to leave me behind in the technology dust as I get myself ready to rock and roll.
It's been a great pleasure to have you on, and like I said, working with you has been awesome thus far, and like I said, I'm looking forward to yeah. So what I will do is, folks, I will be back to tie up any loose ends. We do record these things sometimes, and then I come back to make sure that when you actually hear it, things still accurate. So I will be back to do that on the other side of this musical break. See you on the other side. And again, Rashida, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to that interview between Kristen and I. I hope you enjoyed it. And just to refresh and give you an update, because this was recorded some time ago, my website is up and running. It is allroadscross.com. I'm on social media, Crossroads Podcast. And for my Twitter, it's spelled a little funky, but it's Crossroads PODC, so Pod C and the number 1. Please follow me on social media. Please visit my site so you can subscribe to get updates from me on what's going on, what kind of content I'm looking at, where I'm going, and what I'm doing. Just keep track, and mostly keep track. I would say keep up, but the reality is keep track, because I need an accountability buddy. So if anyone's game, please feel free to hit me up. But again, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and I cannot wait to continue recording and bringing you guys great content. Be blessed.